When my best friend Carol called me at 6 in the morning, I knew something was wrong. Carol doesn't do early mornings. She's the type who considers noon an acceptable breakfast time. "Margaret," she said, her voice shaking, "I need you to sit down." I was already sitting, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise over the lake from my kitchen window. The same view I'd shared with my husband Robert for 37 years before he passed 2 years ago. "What is it?" I asked. "I just saw Linda at the jewelry store downtown with David. Linda is my younger sister. David is my son. Nothing unusual about that, except Carol's voice had that tone. The one that means something is very, very wrong. They were looking at engagement rings, Margaret. Together, as a couple." The coffee mug slipped from my hand. It shattered on the Italian tile floor Robert had installed the year before he died. I watched the dark liquid spread across the white surface, unable to move, unable to speak. "Margaret, are you there?" "That's impossible," I finally managed. "David is dating that paralegal from his firm, Jessica or Jennifer or—" "It's not impossible," Carol interrupted. "I saw them, honey. They were holding hands. He was calling her baby." The jeweler asked how long they'd been together, and Linda said 2 beautiful years. 2 years. My husband had been dead for exactly 2 years and 3 months. I thanked Carol, hung up, and stared at the broken mug on my floor. My mind was spinning, trying to make sense of what I'd just heard. My sister and my son, together. For 2 years. That meant it started just after Robert died, maybe even before. I pulled out my phone and called David. It went straight to voicemail. I tried Linda. Same thing. I sent them both texts. "We need to talk. Family dinner tonight, 7 o'clock. Don't make plans." Then I sat there, surrounded by broken porcelain and spilled coffee, and started to remember things I'd ignored. The way Linda had moved into the guest house on my property right after Robert's funeral, claiming she wanted to support me through this difficult time. How she'd always been around, always inserting herself into every conversation, every decision. The way David had suddenly become so interested in his father's estate, asking questions about the will, about the properties, about the investments. I'd thought he was finally maturing, taking an interest in family finances. He was 35 after all. It seemed natural. The private conversations that would stop when I entered a room. The shared glances I'd dismissed as sibling affection between my son and my sister. Oh God, how could I have been so blind? Robert and I had built everything from nothing. He started with one small accounting firm and grew it into a business with 3 locations and 40 employees. We'd invested well. Real estate, stocks, bonds. When he died, he left me everything. Almost $4 million in assets, including this house, the lake property, and the commercial buildings downtown. David was supposed to inherit it all when I died. That's what Robert wanted. That's what our will stated. But if David married Linda, I stood up, careful to avoid the broken pieces, and walked to Robert's study. I hadn't changed anything in 2 years. His reading glasses were still on the desk. His favorite pen, the one I gave him for our 30th anniversary, sat in its holder. I pulled out the leather folder where we kept copies of important documents. The will, the trust, the property deeds, the life insurance policy. Everything was there, everything was in order, or so I thought. But then, I noticed something. The copy of the deed to our commercial building on Market Street looked different. The paper was slightly whiter, the font not quite right. I pulled out my phone and took a picture, then opened the safe where Robert kept the originals. The original deed was gone. In its place was a photocopy, a good one, but still a copy. My hands were shaking as I checked the other documents. 3 more deeds were copies, all properties that Robert and I owned jointly, now in my name alone since his death. Someone had taken the originals. Someone with access to this study, to this safe. The combination was my birthday. Robert used to joke that I was his most precious treasure, so of course that's what protected all the others. David knew the combination. I'd given it to him last year when I went to visit my college roommate in Arizona for a week. Just in case, I'd said. In case of emergency. In case something happened to me. Linda had been staying in the guest house. She had keys to the main house. She could walk in any time. I sat down in Robert's chair, the leather creaking under my weight, and started to piece it together. The affair. The missing deeds. The sudden interest in family finances. They weren't planning a life together out of love. They were planning to steal everything Robert and I had built. That evening I set the dining room table for 3. The good china, the silver we got as wedding presents. If this was going to be our last family dinner, I'd do it properly. David arrived first, driving his Tesla that I'd bought him for his birthday. He kissed my cheek. "Hey, Mom, what's this about? I had plans tonight." "Plans with whom?" I asked. He hesitated, just for a second. "Just some guys from work. Nothing important." Linda arrived 10 minutes later, letting herself in with her key. She was wearing a new dress, expensive, something I definitely hadn't seen in her closet before. "Sister," she said, hugging me. She smelled like David's cologne. How had I not noticed that before? We sat down to dinner. I'd ordered Italian from Giovanni's, Robert's favorite restaurant, chicken parmesan, fettuccine alfredo, Caesar salad. Everything Robert loved. "This is nice," Linda said, twirling pasta on her fork. "What's the occasion?" I set down my wine glass. "I had an interesting phone call this morning, from Carol." David's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. Linda's face went pale. "She saw you two at the jewelry store, looking at engagement rings." The silence was deafening. David set down his fork carefully. Linda reached for her wine glass with a trembling hand. "Mom, I can explain," David started. "I'm sure you can," I interrupted. "But first, let me tell you what I figured out today. Someone has been in your father's study, someone with the combination to the safe. The original deeds to 4 of our properties are missing, replaced with copies." Linda's wine glass hit the table hard enough to slosh red wine onto the white tablecloth. "Those properties are worth over $2 million, I continued. "And I'm guessing that if I call my lawyer tomorrow, I'll find out someone's been trying to transfer them. Someone who needed original deeds to do it." "It's not what you think," Linda said quickly. "We can explain everything." "Then please do," I said. "Explain to me how my sister and my son ended up in bed together. Explain to me how that happened while my husband, your brother-in-law, your father, was barely cold in his grave." David stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "Dad left everything to you. Everything. Do you know what that felt like? 35 years of being his son, and I got nothing." "That's not true," I said. "The will states that everything goes to you when I die. You know that." "When you die," he repeated. "You're 62, Mom. You could live another 30 years. I'm supposed to wait until I'm in my 60s to get what should be mine." "So, this is about money," I said quietly. "It's about fairness," Linda interjected. "Robert always favored you. Everything was always about you and David. I was just the little sister, always in your shadow. Do you know what it's like to watch your older sister get everything? The perfect husband, the perfect son, the perfect life. So you decided to take it," I said. "We decided to take what we deserve," David corrected. "The properties, the business, everything. It should be mine anyway. I'm his son." "By marrying each other?" I asked. "That's your plan? That's disgusting." "It's legal," Linda said. I checked. Step-aunt and step-nephew. No blood relation. We can get married, combine our claims to the estate, and finally get what's owed to us. I stood up slowly, placing my napkin on the table. "Get out." Mom, David started. "Get out of my house," I repeated. "Both of you. Now." "You can't kick me out," Linda said. "I have a lease on the guest house." "A lease I can terminate with 30 days' notice," I said. which I'm giving you right now, verbally. You'll have it in writing by morning. David stepped toward me. Mom, please. Let's talk about this. We can work something out. Work something out? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You want to work something out? Fine. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to return the original deeds you stole, all of them. And then you're going to leave, and I never want to see either of you again. You need me, David said. Who's going to help you manage the estate? Who's going to handle the business when you can't anymore? Anyone but you, I said. They left. David speeding away in his Tesla, Linda gathering a few things from the guest house before driving off in the Mercedes I'd co-signed for her 3 years ago. I stood in my driveway, watching their taillights disappear, and realized that I was completely alone. My husband was dead. My son had betrayed me. My sister had betrayed me. I had no one. Then I went back inside, poured myself a very large glass of wine, and called my lawyer. His name was James Hartford, and he'd been Robert's attorney for 20 years. He answered on the third ring, even though it was almost 9 o'clock on a Wednesday night. Margaret, is everything all right? No, I said. It's not. I need to see you first thing tomorrow morning, and I need you to bring everything. Every document related to Robert's estate. Every deed. Every contract. Everything. What's happened? I told him. All of it. The affair, the missing deeds, the plan to marry and steal my estate. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then, I'll be at your house at 8 tomorrow morning. Don't touch anything in Robert's study. Don't talk to anyone. And Margaret, I'm so sorry. He showed up at 7:45, carrying 2 briefcases and looking like he hadn't slept. He probably hadn't. We spread everything out on the dining room table. The will, the trust documents, the deeds, the bank statements, the business documents. The good news, James said after 2 hours, is that they haven't actually transferred anything yet. They have the original deeds, but they'd need your signature to complete any transfers, and they'd need to forge it. Could they do that? I asked. Possibly, he admitted, if they practiced enough. If they had access to documents with your signature, which they do. So what do I do? James pulled out a legal pad and started making notes. First, we file a police report. Theft of the original deeds is a crime. Second, we put alerts on all your properties. Any attempt to transfer or mortgage them will be flagged immediately. Third, we change every password, every combination, every access code you have. Fourth, we draft new legal documents that specifically exclude both David and Linda from your estate. Can I do that? He's my son. You can do whatever you want, James said. It's your estate. You can leave it to a cat shelter if you want to, though I'd recommend leaving it to someone who actually deserves it. Over the next week, I did everything James suggested. I filed a police report. The detective assigned to my case was a woman named Sarah Chen, and she took me seriously. She sent officers to both David's apartment and Linda's temporary hotel room with search warrants. They found the deeds in David's home office, hidden in a file labeled Tax Documents 2019. They also found something else, a folder full of practice signatures. My signature, written over and over again on blank paper, getting closer to perfect each time. Detective Chen called me with the news. Mrs. Patterson, I'm going to be honest with you. This is enough for fraud charges. Attempted fraud at minimum, possibly conspiracy to commit fraud. But there's something else. What? We found correspondence between your son and your sister. Emails, texts, some printed documents. They've been planning this for over 3 years. 3 years. That was a year before Robert died. There's more, Detective Chen continued. I don't know how to tell you this gently, so I'm just going to say it. There are emails discussing your husband's death. Specifically, discussing how his death would accelerate their timeline. The room spun. I sat down hard on the nearest chair. What are you saying? I'm saying that we're going to need to look into your husband's death. I know the official cause was a heart attack, But given this new information, we need to rule out foul play. Robert died of a massive heart attack while working late at his office. David found him the next morning. I'd been at a book club meeting that night. Linda had been at the house, staying with us while her apartment was being renovated. "You think they killed him?" I whispered. "I think we need to investigate," Detective Chen said carefully. "I've already contacted the medical examiner. They're going to review the autopsy report and see if we need to exhume the body." I hung up and sat there in my empty house, in the home Robert and I had built together, and wondered if my husband's death had been murder. The investigation took months. They exhumed Robert's body. They ran new tests. They interviewed everyone who'd been at the office that day, everyone who'd seen Robert in his final hours. They found digitalis in his system, a lot of it, enough to cause a heart attack in a healthy man, especially one with a minor heart condition like Robert had. Linda had been a nurse before she retired. She had access to medications. She knew what digitalis was, what it did, how much would be lethal. The police arrested them both. David for theft, fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder. Linda for murder in the first degree. The trial was a media circus. Black widow sister and son plot murder for inheritance. The headlines screamed. $1 million murder. Family betrayal ends in death. I sat in the courtroom every day, listening to the evidence, listening to how Linda had been poisoning Robert's coffee for weeks, small amounts, weakening his heart gradually. How David had made sure to be the one to discover the body, to control the narrative, to make sure it looked like natural causes. How they'd planned to wait a respectful year before starting their relationship publicly, but couldn't resist starting their affair earlier. How they'd been sleeping together in my guest house while I grieved my husband upstairs. How everything had been about money. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. They found Linda guilty of murder in the first degree. They found David guilty as an accomplice, conspiracy to commit murder, theft, and fraud. Linda was sentenced to life without parole. David got 35 years. I sat in the courtroom and watched them be led away in handcuffs. My sister looked back at me once. I didn't look away. I wanted her to see my face, to see that I wasn't crying, wasn't breaking. I wanted her to see that she'd lost everything and I was still standing. After the trial, I sold the guest house property. I couldn't live there anymore, couldn't walk past that building without seeing them together, without imagining my husband dying slowly from poison while they planned their future. I sold Robert's business to his junior partners. They'd been loyal, hardworking, and they loved what they did. Robert would have approved. I kept the house. This house, with the sunrise view over the lake, with the Italian tile floors, and Robert's study, and 37 years of memories, good memories, before everything went wrong. I changed my will. Everything goes to charity now. The local hospital, the children's shelter, the animal rescue where Robert and I used to volunteer. Organizations that do good work, that help people, that honor the values Robert and I actually shared. Carol still comes by every Sunday for coffee. We don't talk about Linda. We don't talk about David. We talk about books and gardens and her grandchildren and the new Italian place that opened downtown. Sometimes I stand in the kitchen, looking out at the lake, and I think about that morning when Carol called me, when my world broke apart with a phone call about engagement rings. I think about how close they came to getting away with it. If Carol hadn't gone to that jewelry store, if she hadn't called me, if I hadn't checked Robert's study that day, they would have transferred the properties, they would have stolen everything, and I might never have known that my husband was murdered. But I did know, and I stopped them. I'm 64 now. I've been alone for 4 years, but I'm not broken. I have friends. I have my memories of the real Robert, the man I loved for 37 years. I have my home and my independence and the satisfaction of knowing that justice was served. David writes to me sometimes from prison, long letters about how sorry he is, how Linda manipulated him, how he was young and stupid and blinded by greed. He asks me to forgive him, to put money in his commissary account, to visit him. I never respond. I never will. Linda doesn't write. I hear from Detective Chen occasionally that she's not doing well in prison, that she's in protective custody because the other inmates don't like women who kill their family members for money. Good. People ask me sometimes if I'm bitter, if I hate them, if I lie awake at night thinking about revenge. I don't. I got my revenge. I got justice. They're in prison for the rest of their lives, and I'm here, in my beautiful home, watching the sunrise over the lake, drinking my coffee from a new mug to replace the one I broke that terrible morning. Robert would be proud of how I handled this. He always said I was stronger than I looked, tougher than people gave me credit for. He was right. I was 62 when my world fell apart. I'm 64 now, and I've rebuilt it. Not the same as it was, it will never be the same, but something new, something mine. And every morning when I watch the sunrise, I think about how close I came to losing everything, and how I didn't, because I'm still here. I'm still standing, and they're not. That's all the revenge I need.